There's a room in your life you've been walking through half-blind since the last week of June, catching your shoulder on the same doorframe, repeating the same sentence twice because the first time didn't land right. You've felt it. Conversations that loop back on themselves before they actually go anywhere. Plans that shift twice before they finally hold. A message you drafted 3 different ways and still weren't sure about sending. That has been the shape of the last couple of weeks for almost everyone, whether or not you follow the sky, whether or not you even believe any of this matters. But something changes today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. For a narrow window, measured in hours rather than days, the planet responsible for most of that fog moves into direct alignment with the Sun. Astronomers call it an inferior conjunction. Astrologers call it a kazimi, an old term that roughly translates to in the heart. For those few hours, the same planet that has been scrambling everyone's signals gets pulled so close to the light source that it briefly stops interfering and starts transmitting instead. If the last couple of weeks felt like a house with the power flickering, today is the moment one room, just one, gets full, steady light. And if you know which room to walk into, you get to see the whole floor plan clearly for the first time since this began. Depending on your time zone, that window falls late today or early tomorrow, which is exactly why so many people are describing this shift a few hours apart from each other and still landing on the exact same feeling. Maybe you already sensed something shifting before you even clicked on this. A dream that felt unusually vivid last night, a wave of nostalgia that hit you out of nowhere this morning, a name popping into your head that you haven't thought about in months. None of that is your imagination running away with you. It's your nervous system picking up on something real, hours before your conscious mind has the language to explain it. Let's walk through what that actually means, because this is not a day to sleep through. Here's what's been happening architecturally, so to speak. Since the final days of June, Mercury, the planet tied to thinking, speaking, listening, and connecting one idea to the next, has been moving backward through the sign of Cancer. Cancer is the part of the chart associated with home, memory, family, and emotional foundation, the load-bearing beams nobody sees because they're built into the walls. So this hasn't really been a retrograde about lost packages and typos, even though you might have had a few of those too. This has been a retrograde about the rooms you grew up in, literally or emotionally, the people you come from, the conversations you never quite finished, the ones that got tucked into a drawer instead of resolved. Think of a retrograde like renovation dust hanging in the air of a house you already live in. Nothing is structurally broken, but visibility is low, and every surface feels like it needs wiping down twice before you trust it. You've probably noticed old contacts reappearing out of nowhere, a childhood friend messaging after years of silence, a memory from a decade ago surfacing mid-afternoon for no obvious reason, pulled up by a smell or a song or a stranger's laugh, a parent or sibling conversation circling back to something that was never fully resolved. None of that is coincidence exactly. It's what happens when the planet of communication reviews its own blueprints instead of drafting new ones. Here's the part most people miss though. A retrograde isn't a flaw in the design, it's scheduled maintenance. Mercury does this 3 or 4 times a year, and roughly a fifth of every calendar year is spent with Mercury moving through this exact process. Civilization doesn't collapse. Deals still close during retrograde. People still fall in love during retrograde. What actually happens is smaller and far more useful than the horror stories suggest. The specific areas of your life it touches get revisited instead of rushed past. You're handed the blueprints again, whether you asked for them or not. Today is different from every other day in this retrograde, though, because of exactly where Mercury sits in relation to the Sun. Picture a hallway with a single, precisely placed skylight cut into the roof. For most of the day, the Sun moves past that skylight without lining up directly overhead. The hallway stays dim, walkable, functional, but dim. You know where the furniture is because you've memorized it, not because you can actually see it. Then, for a short stretch, the Sun sits almost exactly above the opening. Light pours straight down through the shaft. Every piece of furniture in that hallway, every photograph on the wall, every door leading off it becomes visible in a way it wasn't an hour earlier. That's Cazimi. Mercury and the Sun are lining up almost exactly, close enough that ancient astrologers described the smaller planet as sitting in the heart of the larger one. There's an old idea, debated for centuries, that a planet this close to the Sun gets strengthened rather than weakened by the proximity, like it's being handed extra voltage right when it needs it most, instead of being burned out by it. For one day, in the middle of a retrograde that has felt foggy and inward-turned, Mercury gets a jolt of pure, undeniable visibility. This is why the idea that today is the one day the whole retrograde finally makes sense isn't dramatic for the sake of it. This genuinely is that day. Not because the retrograde ends today. It doesn't. It continues running its course for close to 2 more weeks. But because today hands you the floor plan. You get to see, clearly and without static, what the last 2.5 weeks have actually been rearranging underneath the surface of your life. It matters too that this is happening specifically in Cancer and not somewhere else on the chart. Cancer doesn't do detached analysis. It does feeling, memory, protection, belonging. So the clarity that shows up today rarely arrives as a cold, logical realization. It shows up warm. It shows up as a feeling in your chest before it becomes a sentence in your head. If you've spent the past 2 weeks more emotional than usual, more nostalgic than usual, more aware of old family patterns than usual, none of that was you being oversensitive. That was the exact material this particular retrograde was designed to surface. Today simply hands you the lens to look at all of it clearly instead of through fog. Worth knowing too, this isn't some new trend invented for the algorithm. Kazimi is one of the oldest techniques in the entire practice, documented centuries before anyone was tracking engagement or watch time. Older astrologers took it seriously enough to give it its own name, separate from an ordinary conjunction, because they noticed something real, that a planet folded this tightly into the Sun behaves differently than a planet simply near it. Modern astrology, with all its charts and software and precise ephemeris data, hasn't discarded the idea. If anything, the software makes it easier to see exactly how narrow and specific this window actually is, down to the minute. That precision is part of why today feels different, even to people who couldn't tell you a single other thing about the current sky. You don't need the vocabulary to feel the shift. The vocabulary just gives you a way to talk about what you're already sensing. There's also a reason this particular retrograde has felt heavier to a lot of people than the one back at the start of the year. That earlier one moved through Pisces, another water sign, all fog and dissolving boundaries and strange, half-remembered dreams. This one, in Cancer, works on you differently. Pisces asks you to let go of a story you've been telling yourself. Cancer asks you to look directly at the people and the rooms that story actually came from. 2 water sign retrogrades in the same year, only months apart, means a lot of people are quietly moving through an unusually emotional stretch, whether or not they'd normally describe themselves as emotional people. If you've felt more tender than usual since the start of the year, more easily moved, more prone to old memories catching you off guard, that hasn't been random. It's been a pattern. And today is one of the clearest moments in that entire pattern to actually see it laid out in front of you instead of just living inside it. And if you're someone who isn't fully sure you believe in any of this, that's completely fine. And honestly, you don't need to. Strip away every word like Mercury and Cazimi and retrograde, and what's left is still true. You have almost certainly had a stretch of weeks that felt foggier than usual, and today, for reasons that are at minimum a useful coincidence, a lot of people are reporting a sudden burst of clarity at the same time. Whether you credit that to a planet aligning with the sun or simply to the calendar catching up with your nervous system, the practical value is identical. Pay attention today. Write things down. Notice what suddenly makes sense. The sky doesn't need your belief to be a useful prompt for reflection. It just needs your attention for a few hours, which you are probably going to give to something far less useful anyway. Let's go through what that clarity actually tends to look like when it shows up. Not as a list of superstitions to memorize, as a set of patterns worth noticing in your own day, because there's a good chance you're already noticing at least 2 or 3 of them without having a name for what's happening. The first pattern is repetition with a twist. If you've had the same piece of information, advice, or feeling come at you from 3 unrelated directions over the past several days, a friend says something, then a stranger's offhand comment echoes it almost word for word. Then you read a similar line somewhere unrelated entirely. Today is often the day that pattern finally resolves into a single, coherent message instead of feeling like background noise. Retrogrades love repetition. Kazimi is when the repetition finally clicks into a sentence you can actually use, rather than 3 separate coincidences you keep dismissing. The second pattern is an old room reopening. Somebody from your past, an ex, an estranged friend, a former co-worker, a relative you haven't spoken to properly in a while, has probably crossed your mind or your notifications recently, maybe more than once. Cancer retrogrades are notorious for this specific kind of visitor. Today tends to be the day you finally understand why they resurfaced. Not necessarily so you reconnect with them. Sometimes the entire purpose of the visit is to show you how much you've changed since the last time that door was open. You walk back into the room in your memory, notice it's smaller than you remembered, quieter than you remembered, and finally get to close it on your own terms instead of leaving it ajar. The third pattern is a conversation that suddenly resolves itself. Maybe there's an exchange from the past 2 weeks that left you unsettled. A text that could be read 2 completely different ways. A comment in a meeting that felt slightly off. A silence from someone you couldn't interpret, no matter how many times you replayed it. Under today's alignment, a lot of people report that the missing context simply arrives. You reread the message and catch the actual tone this time. You remember a detail you'd conveniently forgotten, maybe something about the timing or what else was going on in that person's life that day. The confusion doesn't just fade quietly into the background, it gets replaced with an actual answer, one you can act on or finally let go of, instead of a question mark you keep carrying around in your pocket. The fourth pattern is your gut getting louder than your thoughts. Mercury usually represents the analytical, list-making, sentence-structuring part of the mind, the part that wants evidence before it commits to anything. But when it's folded this closely into the sun, that analytical voice quiets down, and something older speaks instead. The kind of knowing that doesn't come with a tidy explanation attached to it. You might just know that a decision is right, or that someone isn't being fully straight with you, or that it's time to let a particular thing go, without being able to justify any of it on paper yet. Today is a good day to trust that quieter voice a little more than usual, even without a spreadsheet to back it up. The fifth pattern feels almost contradictory at first. You may feel unusually exposed and unusually sure of yourself at the exact same time. That's actually consistent with what a kazimi represents. Ancient astrologers debated for generations whether this closeness to the sun helps a planet or scorches it. The honest answer, most modern astrologers agree, is a bit of both. You might feel like something in you is more visible today, less guarded, a little rawer around the edges than usual. And in that same breath, you might feel more certain about who you actually are than you have in weeks. Vulnerability and clarity showing up together isn't a malfunction in the system. It's usually a sign that whatever you're feeling right now is unusually close to the truth. The sixth pattern is unsent words finally making sense. If you've had something half-written in your notes app for days, a message you started and deleted more than once, a conversation you've been quietly rehearsing in the shower or the car. Today is often the day the right wording finally arrives on its own. Not because the sky writes it for you, but because the noise that was drowning it out has quieted briefly, giving the actual sentence room to surface in its finished form. The seventh pattern shows up specifically around your sense of home and safety. You might suddenly notice exactly what's been making a space, a relationship, or even your own daily routine feel unsettled lately when yesterday you couldn't have named it if someone asked you directly. This is Cancer's fingerprint on the whole event. Clarity that centers on where and with whom you feel safe, rather than clarity about a task or a deadline. Pay attention if a specific room, a specific person, or a specific habit suddenly feels obviously right or obviously wrong today. That obviousness is the point. The eighth pattern is a kind of quiet forgiveness, aimed either outward or inward. Retrogrades in Cancer tend to dig up old guilt, old resentment, old versions of a story you've told yourself for years, usually a story that cast you as either entirely at fault or entirely blameless, when the truth was almost certainly somewhere quieter and more complicated in between. Today, under this particular alignment, a good number of people find that an old grievance simply loosens its grip, not because the situation changed, but because they finally see it clearly enough from enough distance to set it down without needing anyone else's apology or agreement first. If you notice a weight lifting today that you've been carrying for a long time without quite naming it, let it lift. You don't need a dramatic reason, a big conversation, or a formal resolution. Sometimes the light just finally reaches that corner of the room, and the thing you've been carrying turns out to be lighter than you remembered, or easier to put down than you assumed it would be. The ninth pattern, and maybe the single most useful one, is finally being able to name what's been off. For 2.5 weeks, you may have felt a low hum of unease you couldn't quite locate. Nothing dramatic, just a background static running underneath your normal day. Today tends to be the day that static resolves into an actual sentence, something like, "Oh, that's what this has been about the whole time." That one sentence is often worth more than any advice anyone else could hand you because you generated it yourself from your own floor plan, not someone else's. The 10th pattern is easy to miss because it happens while you're not even conscious. Cancer has a strong pull toward the moon and everything moon-related, including sleep and dreaming. So it's common for the night surrounding a kazimi like this one to bring unusually vivid, specific dreams, the kind you actually remember in detail the next morning instead of losing within seconds of waking up. If you wake up today or tomorrow with a dream still fully intact in your memory, especially one involving a childhood home, a family member, or somebody from years ago, don't brush it off as random static. Write down whatever you remember, even just a fragment or a feeling, before it fades. Dreams around a Cazimi window tend to be unusually literal compared to normal dream logic, and people often find, days or weeks later, that the dream was quietly pointing at exactly the thing that needed pointing at. It helps to see where this actually lands in a normal day rather than just in theory. So let's walk through 3 ordinary rooms of your life where this tends to show up most. In relationships, this often looks like sudden, unexpected honesty. A conversation that's been circling the same 3 sentences for days finally lands somewhere real, either because you say the thing you've been avoiding or because the other person does. It doesn't always feel comfortable. Clarity rarely does, but there's a noticeable difference between an uncomfortable conversation that goes nowhere and an uncomfortable conversation that actually resolves something. Today tends to produce the second kind. If you've been putting off a call or a conversation because you weren't sure what to say, you might find the right words show up more easily than expected, almost like they were waiting for the light to turn on. At work, this tends to look less like a big breakthrough and more like sudden, quiet precision. A project that's felt vague finally gets a clear next step. An email you've rewritten 4 times finally reads the way you meant it to. A decision you've been going back and forth on for days suddenly stops feeling like a coin flip. This isn't the day for launching something brand new. That's not what this particular window is built for. But it is an excellent day for finally seeing the shape of something you've been circling, so you can move on it properly once the fog fully clears in a couple of weeks. And in your relationship with yourself, this often shows up as a strange kind of self-recognition. A pattern you've repeated in every relationship, every job, every argument, without quite naming it, suddenly has a name. Not in a harsh, self-critical way, more like finally recognizing your own handwriting on something you'd forgotten you wrote. That kind of self-recognition tends to be gentler than people expect. It doesn't usually arrive as criticism. It arrives as relief, the specific relief of finally understanding your own reaction to something instead of just living inside it. Now, here's the part that genuinely matters most. What happens if this particular day passes and you don't pay it any attention? It's not a catastrophe. Nothing falls apart because you missed a Cazimi window while you were in a meeting or asleep or simply living your life. But here's what tends to happen instead. The fog simply continues on schedule. The retrograde still has close to 2 weeks left to run its full course, and without today's flash of clarity to anchor it, those 2 remaining weeks can feel more like drifting than reviewing. The insight that was available today doesn't vanish forever, but it usually arrives later, slower, and with considerably more friction, often right as Mercury turns direct again near the end of the month, when you're forced to catch up on everything at once instead of processing it gradually and gently. Picture that hallway again. If you happen to walk through it while the light is pouring straight down through the skylight, you see everything at once, effortlessly, without straining. If you walk through an hour later, once the sun has shifted position even slightly, you're back to feeling your way along the wall from memory instead of sight. The information hasn't disappeared. You just have to work considerably harder to find it. And you're a lot more likely to bump into something you could have simply seen coming. So here's what's genuinely worth doing with the next several hours, in plain, practical terms. Write down whatever thought crosses your mind unusually clearly today. even if it seems small or unrelated to anything important. Don't dismiss the person or memory that resurfaced this week. Ask yourself what it's actually showing you, not what you should do about it yet, just what it's showing you right now. If a conversation suddenly makes sense that didn't before, let it settle instead of immediately overthinking it. You don't have to act on every insight today. You just have to notice it, because noticing is what quietly turns a passing feeling into something you can actually use later. One thing worth being careful about, though, today is a day for noticing, not necessarily a day for major, irreversible decisions. The retrograde itself is still very much active, even during this bright window, and Mercury being close to the Sun doesn't cancel out the review and revise energy of the broader cycle. If a huge decision suddenly feels obvious today, it's worth writing that clarity down and revisiting it again after Mercury goes direct in a couple of weeks, just to make sure the insight holds once the noise fully clears, rather than acting purely on a single bright moment. Use today to see the truth. Give yourself the following weeks to build on it properly. This especially applies to that person who resurfaced. If someone from your past reached out this week or crossed your mind so persistently that it felt like more than coincidence, today's clarity might tell you exactly why. It might also tell you that the door is fully, comfortably closed, and that's just as valid an outcome as reopening it. Don't mistake clarity for an obligation to act. Sometimes the entire point of seeing something clearly is realizing you're finally free to leave it exactly where it is. And if you're the one who's been thinking about reaching out to somebody, notice whether that impulse feels warm and settled today, or whether it feels like anxious static dressed up as closure. Today tends to make that distinction unusually easy to feel, even when it's hard to explain out loud. One more thing worth knowing, because it changes how you carry this whole stretch of the month. This Cazimi sits almost exactly at the midpoint of the retrograde, and only a couple of days from now, the Moon and Sun align in this same emotionally rich sign for a brand new lunar cycle. That means whatever becomes clear to you today isn't just a flash and then nothing afterward. It's the seed of what you'll be intentionally building toward in the days right after, once that new cycle opens. Today shows you the floor plan. The days right ahead let you actually start rearranging the furniture inside it. It's also worth knowing that today isn't happening in isolation. The wider sky this month has been unusually busy behind the scenes. Slower moving outer planets quietly forming rare angles with each other, the kind that only happen every few years and shape the background mood of entire seasons rather than single days. You don't need to track any of that in detail to benefit from today. Just know that the clarity landing on you right now is arriving inside a bigger stretch of change than most people realize, which is part of why it might feel more significant than a typical retrograde insight. You're not just resolving a personal loop, you're catching a clear signal during a season when a lot of bigger, slower signals are also quietly rearranging themselves in the background. So if you take just one thing from the next several hours, let it be this: you're not required to fix everything today. You're not required to reply to the person who resurfaced, or make the decision your gut has been quietly nudging you toward, or finish the sentence you've been circling around for weeks. All you're required to do right now is look. The light is only positioned like this for a short while, and it happens to be pointed exactly where you've been avoiding looking for the better part of a month. Use it while it's actually here, because it won't stay in this exact position for long. Before you go, sit with 3 short questions, even just for a minute. You don't need to answer them out loud or write an essay about them. Just let them land. What have you heard 3 separate times in the past week without connecting the dots until right now? Who or what from your past has been quietly knocking, and what would it mean to finally answer that knock on your own terms instead of ignoring it or being ambushed by it? And underneath the noise of the last 2.5 weeks, what's the one sentence you'd use to describe what this whole stretch has actually been about for you specifically? That last question is usually the one that matters most, and it's often the one people are most surprised to find they already know the answer to the moment they actually sit still long enough to ask it. If any of this described something you're already noticing today, comment the single word that best matches what came up for you. A name, a memory, an unsent message, or simply the word clarity. You'd be surprised how much it can settle a strange, foggy feeling just to see it named plainly by someone else going through the exact same thing at the exact same time, on the other side of a screen, in a completely different part of the world. Then, take a moment to read a few of the comments below yours. You are far from the only person the sky is handing a floor plan to right now, and realizing you're not the only one experiencing this often turns out to be its own quiet, useful kind of reassurance. If this is the first time you've come across this way of looking at the sky, consider staying a while longer. There's a lot more of this retrograde still unfolding over the next couple of weeks, and a lot more clarity still on its way once Mercury finally straightens itself out and the fog lifts for good. You've spent the better part of a month walking a little more carefully than usual, feeling your way through rooms that felt slightly unfamiliar, even though you'd technically lived in them for years. That wasn't weakness, and it wasn't you being unusually fragile. That was you paying close attention while the available light was low, doing the best you could with what you had, one careful step at a time, without a map. Most people don't notice how much effort that takes until the lights come back on, and they realize how far they'd actually come while stumbling through the dark. Today, for a few hours, the light finally matches the effort you've already been quietly putting in this whole time. You're not being tested anymore. You're finally being shown what you were building toward the entire time, even when it didn't feel like building anything at all, even on the days it just felt like getting through. Whatever becomes clear to you in the next several hours, let it be enough on its own. You don't need to turn it into a 5-step plan by tonight. You don't need to post about it, explain it, or justify it to anyone. You just need to let yourself see it, the way you'd finally see a familiar room once someone switched the light back on. Walk into the room. Look around properly, without rushing. You've genuinely earned the light, and there's no version of today where you needed to earn it any more than you already have.